Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Hey and Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we are still in the midst of the complex sugyos of Amira La'akum. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanusin Batzar Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Umbein Bayabasha Hamokim Yerachem Aleihem Ve'Yitzia Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'ira U'Mishiba L'Geula Hashta Bagala U'Zman Kariv V'Neimar Amen. Excuse me. Okay, so we pick up today on the top line in the Shulchan Aruch of Hey Amud Beis, Siman Reish Mem Dalid Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Im Banu Einam Yehudim LiYisrael Bayis B'Shabbos B'Isser. If a group of Einam Yehudim construct a house for a Yid on Shabbos, and they did this B'Isser. Now, we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah precisely what the case over here is. Says the Mechaber, Nochain lahachmir, it would be proper to act stringently, to be machmir, shelo yukansu bay, that you should not use the house. Literally, you should not enter the house. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to say that this means la'olam. So if you hired Einam Yehudim to build a house for you, and the arrangement was such an arrangement where the Einam Yehudim worked on Shabbos and they did it be'isser, the proper thing, says the Mechaber, is do not use the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah Oiskat Yotes. First thing we have to understand is, what does it mean that the Einam Yehudim built the house on Shabbos be'isser? What precisely was the case? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Hainu, Shahaya Biki Boilis. You hired a kablan, or a group of kablanim, to go ahead and construct the house. Now remember what we've said previously. Really, the arrangement of a kablan is not inherently usher. It doesn't entail Amir La'akum, because when you hire a kablan, you're hiring the kablan by the job, you're paying him for the job, you're not requiring him to work on Shabbos. If you would require him to work on Shabbos, I don't care if he's a kablan. If you require him to work on Shabbos, that's Amir La'akum 101. But over here, you hired a kablan, you're paying him for the job, so you're paying him $250,000 to build you a house. He's going to deliver a house to you. He could work at his schedule. If he wants to work on Shabbos, he'll work on Shabbos. If he doesn't want to work on Shabbos, he won't work on Shabbos. If he works on Shabbos, he's doing it for his own benefit. He wants to complete the job, deliver the house to you, so he could move on and do a job for somebody else. The work that he's doing, when he's on the construction site and he's banging in nails and shooting in screws, we don't see him as doing your work. He's doing his work. He was contracted to build a house and deliver a house. So that's his avodah that he's doing. So inherently, kablanus does not entail Amir La'akum, and inherently it's mutter. What's the problem? The problem is he's building a house. Building a house is avodah b'mechuber lekarka. He's doing something that's mechuber lekarka. Whenever we deal with mechuber lekarka, the rule of thumb is shem ba'olav olav. Everybody knows that construction site is Ruvain's construction site. So now they see an Eina Yehudi doing work for a Yid, and they're going to be choshed that the Yid hired schirei yom, that these are per diem employees that were hired to work on Shabbos. That would be also al Samir La'akum. So because this is avodah b'mechuber lekarka, and like the Mishnah Berurah says right over here in the next words, u'besoich hatchum, and the work is being done within the tchum of a Yiddish shchuna, so there's a maras ayin problem. So what does it mean when the Mechaber says, Banu Einam Yehudim LiYisrael Bayis B'Shabbos B'Isser? It means you hired kablanim, they're doing work b'mechuber lekarka, it's b'soich hatchum. This is also because of maras ayin. Tehu also rak misha maras ayin, says the Mishnah Berurah. The be'emes, because the truth is, like I said, this is not inherently osir. The be'emes adaiti dinavshei avid v'chanal, because like we've seen previously, really kablanus is mutter, because we say nachvi adaiti dinavshei avid. Aval im hayu schirei yom. But says the Mishnah Berurah, if that wouldn't be the case, if the case would be that you actually hired schirei yom, you actually hired per diem employees who are getting paid for their time and they're getting paid to work on Shabbos, the Medina Aser, that would be inherently Aser. That would be Aser Mi'ikar Adin. Yesh Bazeh Isser Mitzad Adin B'di'evet. Then, Me'ikar Adin you would not be allowed to use the house. V'loi Nochoin Belvad. If you really hired Tzchirei Yom Chas V'Chalila to build you a house on Shabbos, which would be Mamish Aser Bisham Amir La'akum, it would be Aser Me'ikar Adin. Over there, the Mechaber wouldn't say Nochoin La'achmir. It would be proper to be Machmir and not use the house. No, over there the halacha would be that you're not allowed to use the house. It's only Nachad Lahachmir over here because we're talking about something which was only Aser Misham Maris Ayin. Kain Kosav Magen Avram, so writes the Magen Avram, V'chein Muchach Gam Kain Das Abach, and so too it's very clear from the words of the Bach, Le'inyan Schir Yom. V'chein Kosav Chai Adam, so writes the Chai Adam, the Beschir Yom, that if you would hire Chas V'Chalila Schir Yom, Mamish Amir La'akum, pay them by their time to go work on Shabbos, Aser Medina B'inyan Zeh, Shu Milsa Defarheskia. This would be Aser Me'ikar Adin to use the house. Why? Because you're being over Amir La'akum, something that's really Aser with Amir La'akum, and it's being done B'farheskia. It's being done publicly. So then, it would be Aser to use the house, says the Mishnah Berurah, Loi, for the owner of the house, for the one that hired the Schirei Yom, it would be Aser La'olam. That house would be Aser for him to use forever. Me'ikar Adin. The La'acherim, for other people, it would be Aser B'chtei Sheyasu. So in other words, if Chas v'Shalom, Ruvain went ahead and hired Schirei Yom to go build him a house Be'isser on Shabbos, that house is going to be Aser to Ruvain forever. Ruvain cannot use that house. Somebody else wants to use the house, it's Aser for him B'chtei Sheyasu. What does it mean B'chtei Sheyasu? Let's say the Nachri Schir Yom worked in the house, he installed the kitchen in the house, and it took him 12 hours to install the kitchen. So now, you're not allowed to use that house for 12 hours after Shabbos. You have to allow enough time to elapse that the work that was done Be'isser could have been done Beheter. So there's a difference over here between the one who actually hired the Schirei Yom, the one for whom the Schirei Yom worked, and other people. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'yesh Mekilim, there are those that are Mekel, Ta'af B'kahai Gavna, and they say that even in a case where somebody mamish hired Schirei Yom to build him a house Be'isser, Einoi Aser Medina, it's still only Aser Me'ikar Adin, Ki Im B'chtei Sheyasu. Even for the owner himself, it's only Aser Me'ikar Adin B'chtei Sheyasu, not La'olam. V'ayla Kamam B'simin Shin Chafes, if you're Dalet Sham, by Mishnah Berurah. So just to recap quickly what we saw over here in the Mechaber and in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mechaber told me halacha. We're talking here so far about kablanus here in Reish Mem Dalet. So the Mechaber told me halacha. If a Yid hired a kablan to go build a house for him, and he allowed the kablan to work on Shabbos, which is Aser B'Sham Maris Ayin, it's not Aser Me'ikar Adin. Kablanus is mutter me'ikar adin, even by mechuber, but by mechuber lekarka, like building a house, it's also because of maris ayin. If that happened, says the mechaber, then it's proper to be machmir, that you should never use the house. That's what the mechaber said. Says the Mishnah Berurah, understand, that's the case. The case is that you hired a kablan. But let's say you didn't hire a kablan. Let's say you mamish hired schirei yom. You're paying them by the day, and you mamish hired them to work on Shabbos. Aser Mishum Maris Ayin, Aser Mishum Amir La'akum 101. This is not Maris Ayin. This is Aser Me'ikar Adin. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, the halacha wouldn't be Nachain Lahachmir. The halacha would be that the one that the house was built for, he's not allowed to use the house. Me'ikar Adin, not because of a chumrah. Other people are also not restricted from using the house, but only B'chtei Sheyasu. Only for the amount of time it would take to have the malacha that was done be'isser on Shabbos to be done beheter, not on Shabbos. Then he brought down, there are those that are mekel, even by schirei yom, and they say, even by schirei yom, B'di'evet, post facto, after the fact, it's not usher for the guy who did it, la'olam. It's usher for him also, only b'chtei sheyasu, me'ikar hadin. Okay. Ois katan chaf, the words of the Mechaber were, nochoin lahachmir, it would be proper to act stringently and not use the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'achraynim kasvu, and if you look in the Sharet Zion, Ois katan chaf beis, he brings this down from the Bach, the Taz, the Chayodam, other Achrayim. He says, V'Achrayim Kasu, the Achrayim right, the B'di'eved, post facto, once the Kablanim already did the work B'Isser, Yesh Lismach B'Kablanus, Al Das Rabbeinu Tam. When it comes to Kablanus, which again is only Osir, even by Mechubal Karka, because of Maris Ayin, it's not Osir Mi'ikradin, so B'di'eved, you could be Saimach on the Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, and therefore, umuter ladur by afilu la'atzmai, even the person who had the house built for him, be'isser, even he himself, he's allowed to live in it. V'chein besitos ha'avonim v'tikun ha'koros, and so too, by the case that we had previously, which is not mamish avodah b'mechubal karka, but where you had an Eina Yehudi Kablan go ahead and cut building blocks or mill building beams for you, which are tzarich mechuber. If you remember, the Mechaber said that tzarich mechuber is treated the same way as mechuber, so that's also aser b'shamar asayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah also, by such a case also, by tzarchei mechuber, also the halacha would be yesh lahate b'di'eved l'shakam b'binyan. B'di'eved, you would be allowed to use, those building blocks or those stones. Ois katan chaf aleph, the Mechaber said, what is the chumrah over here? The proper chumrah would be shelo yu kansubai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, realize what the Mechaber is saying. When he says shelo yu kansubai, it would be proper to be machber and not enter the house. He means la'olam, forever. Va'afilu acherim. And when he says that, when the Mechaber says that it would be proper to be machber not to enter the house, it doesn't mean only for the one who had it built. It means even for other people. It would be proper to be machber that the house should never be used. But the house does not become aser b'hana. The owner of the house, the one who paid to have this house built be'isser, he's allowed to have a na from the house. What does that mean? So imagine this case. Reuven went ahead and be'isser, he hired kablanim, and he allowed the kablanim to build the house, to do avodah b'mechuber l'karka on Shabbos, which is also b'shomar asayin. Says the Mechaber, the proper chumrah is you can't use the house forever. Nor should you go ahead and sell it to your friend Shimon, who you know is house hunting. No, the proper thing would be that Shimon should also not use the house. So what should be with the house? You could sell it to a nachri. You could sell it to a guy. And what if you're on a block where the Yid not going to hate you because you sold it to a guy? I don't know. You got a problem. But that's the Shita Samachaber. Remember, the Mishnah Berurah told us that Lamaisa, B'di'eved, Yachrayim say we could be Saivach HaShitas Rabbeinu Tam. And in such a case, you could use the house. Now let's go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah, second line down in the Shulchan Aruch here on Hey Amud Beis. Hago, Miu, however, Im Hisna Yisrael im Eina Yehudi, Shaloi Lasli Sloi Malacha B'Shabbos. Let's say the Yid did the right thing. Reuven went ahead, he hired Kablanim to buy the house, and he knows that the halacha is that he can't let them work on Shabbos because it's Avodim and Mechubal Karka and it's also Mishomar Sayin. So he hired Tony, and he told Tony 6 times, remember, no work on Shabbos. So he was very clear, no work on Shabbos. Says the Ramah. Meanwhile, Hisli Yisrael Amen Yehudi. Shaloi Lasei Shalom Malacha B'Shabbos. If Reuven did the proper thing and he made a Tanai with the Eina Yehudi, no work on Shabbos. Ve'Eina Yehudi Asab Al Karchoi. And the Tony, the Eina Yehudi, went ahead anyway, and he decided he's going and he's doing the work on Shabbos. Why? Because it's in his best interests. L'maher lahashlam alachtoi, because he wants to knock the job on because he has other people that wanted to build houses. Ein lochush. Says the Ramah, you don't have to be concerned. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that ein lochush means not just he's going on the Mechaber. The Mechaber said if the house was built be'isser, it's nachon lahachmir not to use the house. Says the Ramah, if you made a Tanai with Tony that he shouldn't work on Shabbos, you don't have to worry about it. You could use the house. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no, Ein Lachush means even more than that. Ein Lachush means if you made the Tanai with Tony and you told Tony, remember, no work on Shabbos, and then you walked by the construction site on Shabbos and you saw Tony and his crew working on Shabbos, you're not mechuyev to chase them away. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say. And we're going to have to understand why that should be the case. So let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Chaf Beis. The words of the Ramah were, you made a Tanai with the Eina Yehudi Kablan, but then he went ahead and he worked on Shabbos a Bal Karcha. Now the words Bal Karcha usually means against his will. Against the will of the owner, right? The owner made it tonight. Tony, no work on Shabbos. Tony came and worked on Shabbos anyway. Bal Karcha. Says the Mishnah, what does that mean, Bal Karcha? He went against the Tanai. You made a Tanai. It doesn't mean that you made a Tanai and you put up a fence and the guy came and he broke the lock and he went in and you called the police and he said, Af al Pikain. Not so extreme. What it means over here is you made a Tanai with Tony, no work on Shabbos. Tony went ahead and he's working on Shabbos. Al Kain ein loy lachish. Now I want to be medayik a little bit in the Chavetz Chaim's lashon. Whenever I'm learning Mishnah Berurah, and I keep a picture of the Chavetz Chaim here on my wall. You can't see it because it's behind the camera. I always take a look at that picture. It's what has now become the famous picture of the Chavetz Chaim. If they say if it was from the Knessia Gedolah or something, it became famous a few years ago. They had the video clip of the Chavetz Chaim. I have that picture on my wall. And whenever I'm reading the lashon of the Chavetz Chaim, especially when I want to be medayik in his lashon, I always look at the Chavetz Chaim. Remember, the Chavetz Chaim is the one who understood lashon. He understood the power of a word, the power of speech. He was very careful. Even though this is the written word, I'm sure he was extremely careful with his lashonos. The wording of the Chavetz Chaim over here is, since the Eina Yehudi was over on the Tanai that the Yehudi made with him up front, Reuven told Tony, remember, no work on Shabbos. Al Kain, therefore, ein loy lachosh lazeh. Therefore, Reuven does not have to be concerned with the fact that Tony is working on Shabbos. Dahainu, which means she'ain tzarich afilu limchos loy oid. He doesn't even have to object. So you hear what we're saying over here? Really, the fact that Tony is nailing and shooting in screws and drilling and doing all this malacha on Shabbos, really it's aser mishum marasayin. He's doing avodah b'mechuber lekarka for Reuven as a kablan on Shabbos. That's aser mishum marasayin. The Mechaber just told me, you want to know how bad it is if an Eina Yehudi does work b'kablanos for you on Shabbos in an oifen where it's aser mishum marasayin? It's so bad that really nachid lahachmir, that you shouldn't use the house. You shouldn't sell it to your friend Shimon. He shouldn't use the house. The only thing you could do with it is sell it to an Eina Yehudi. That's what we saw from the Mechaber. Now comes the Ramah and says, but if you made it tonight with Tony up front and you told him don't work on Shabbos, and he went and worked on Shabbos anyway, then you don't have to worry about it. What does it mean you don't have to worry about it? Even if you see him working, you do not have to object. Kein muchach b'Mordechai v'Rabbein Yeruchim she'em b'kar din zeh shehuva b'Beis Yosef l'kaman v'chein muchach b'Bir Agra. Says the Mishnah Berurah that this is what comes out from the Mordechai, from the Rabbein Yeruchim. This is what's clear from the Gra. Okay, so here's the first opinion that we see here in the Mishnah Berurah, that the Mishnah Berurah is learning the Ramah, that when the Ramah says ein lachish lazeh, it means to the extent that you do not even have to protest against the Eina Yehudi when you see him working. Very extreme opinion that we'll have to explain. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings down a Magen Avram that disagrees. V'ayim Magen Avram, he says, take a look at the Magen Avram, shevafakveg ma'oid b'din zeh. The Magen Avram takes a lot of issue with this. The Kevitchu mechuber, the Magen Avram says, I don't understand. It's avodah b'mechuber lekarka. Vevi milsia defarhesia. And since it's avodah b'mechuber lekarka, and we say that mechuber is shem ba'olav olav, so that means that this is farhesia. Ikach shada derayim shelo yadu shehisna. So we mamish have Maris Ayin. The fact that you made a Tanai with Tony, that Tony shouldn't work on Shabbos, does that stop the Maris Ayin? Because you made a Tanai with Tony that he shouldn't work on Shabbos, that's going to stop Yankel Shmerel from walking by the construction site, seeing that Tony is working and being choshed you, that you went ahead and you hired Schire Yom? Yankel Shmerel has no access to your contracts. He doesn't know that you made a Tanai with Tony not to work on Shabbos. So how does this take away the Maris Ayin? And if it doesn't take away the Maris Ayin, why on earth would the halacha be that you're not mechuyev to object to Tony? You should tell Tony, get off my construction site. There's a problem with Maris Ayin here. How does the fact that you made it tonight, koydem lamaisa, how does that take off the Maris Ayin? That's the Magen Avram's pella. The Magen Avram doesn't understand to learn the Ramah this way. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, v'chein be'Elya Rabbah, and the skashal ikra din shel Mordechai. The Elya Rabbah asks on the Mordechai, doesn't understand this Mordechai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'alkein, therefore, ein lahakel bazeh. You can't be maker like this. Or rather, says the Chavetz Chaim, yira limchois loy, you must object to the kablan that's doing the work on Shabbos, ulemanai mipulasai, and you have to stop him from doing his work. So here we have two different ways to understand the Ramah. I want to be clear about what's going on over here, right? The Mechaber said the Kablan Eina Yehudi did work for you on Shabbos be'Isser. He did work for you on Shabbos, which is a problem of Maris Ayin. It would be proper to be Machmir never to use the house. Comes along the Ramah says, but if you did the right thing, if when you hired the Kablan, you told the Kablan you cannot do work on Shabbos, and the Kablan came and he did work on Shabbos anyway, says the Ramah, ein lachush. What does that mean, ein lachush? You shouldn't be concerned. Brings down the Chavetz Chaim two shitas. You have the shita from the Mordechai, the Rabbeinu Yerucham. It says it comes out this way. The Gra understood the Ramah this way. That ein lachush that means once you made it tonight with Tony and you told him no work on Shabbos, you're done. He does work on Shabbos, you're not even mechuyev to go ahead and object. Asks the Magen Avram, I don't understand, it's pillar plum. There's Maris Ayin, mamish going on over here. Tony's doing work on a Yiddish construction site on Shabbos. Mechubel karka, it's considered for Hesia. People are going to walk by, they're going to think that Ruvain Chas Chalila hired a Schir Yom to do work for him on Shabbos. It's mamish Maris Ayin. How could you say that Ruvain could walk by and just leave Tony to his own designs and not protest? Therefore, the Magen Avram says, that's not pshat in the Ramah. Pshat in the Ramah must be that you have to stop him. Maybe you're allowed to live in the house if he did it. He went ahead, he built the house, but you're allowed to use the house. We're not going to apply the Mechaber's halacha that you're not allowed to use the house. You're allowed to use the house. But to stop him, of course you have to stop him. And the Mishnah Berurah goes with that shita. He says you have to stop him. So what's pshat in the Mordechai, the Rabbeinu Yerucham? So I think if you're medayik in the words of the Chavetz Chaim in the beginning of Ois Kat and Chav Beis, where he says, Ritzoynoi loymar, sha'avar al tanoi. What happened over here was Tony broke the Tanai. He went against the condition that Ruvain made with him when he hired him. Shehisti imay mikaidim. Ruvain did mamish the right thing, and he spelled out to Tony no work on Shabbos. Al kain, therefore, ein lo lachish lozeh. Therefore, Ruvain no longer has to be concerned with anything that Tony does. You know why? Because remember, what's the whole isser that we're dealing with here? We're dealing with Amir La'akum. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with Amir La'akum. Really, there should be no Amir La'akum over here at all, because we're dealing with a Kablan. And by a Kablan, we say there is no Amir La'akum, because he's getting paid by the job. The work that he's doing is his own work. It's not your work. You didn't have him work on Shabbos. You don't need him to work on Shabbos. He's working on Shabbos for himself. So we're dealing with an Issa D'Rabbanan of Amir La'akum. In this case of Kablanus, there should be no Amir La'akum at all. The only reason there's any problem over here is because of Maris Ayin on Amir La'akum. There would be a Maris Ayin because people are going to think that he's not a kablan, that he hired a schir yain. Says the Ramah, how far are we going to take this? If you made a t'nai with the kablan, normally when we're talking about a kablan with Amir La'akum, we're not talking about a case where you told the kablan no work on Shabbos. When we say that kablanus does not entail Amir La'akum, we're usually just talking about a standard case of kablanus. You hired Tony, build a house for me for $250,000. You didn't talk about Shabbos. Shabbos never came up in conversation. He's a kablan. You told him there's no specific due date when you must deliver the house for me. So you're not requiring him to work on Shabbos. But you also didn't make a t'nai before and to tell him not to work on Shabbos. There's no Amir La'akum because you never asked him to work on Shabbos. You don't need him to work on Shabbos. He's not getting paid for his time. He's getting paid by the job. The work that he's doing is his work. It's not my work. So there's no Amir La'akum. But now, in the Ramah, we're talking about a case where you went even a step weiter. You did discuss Shabbos, and you told him beferish not to work on Shabbos. Says the Ramah, according to the Mordechai, it says the Ramah based on the Mordechai, the Rebbeinu Yerucham, everything else. They say over here, this is so far removed from Amir La'akum. There's no way to say that there's any Amir La'akum over here. You mamish instructed Tony beferish, do not work for me on Shabbos. Now you're going to tell me that we're going to hold you responsible because of Maris Ayin on this completely non-existent Amir La'akum. And we're going to tell you that you're mechuyev to object and protest to Tony and chase him off the construction site? Says the Ramah, no. When something is so, the whole sugya doesn't start. When could we have Maris Ayin on the Amir La'akum? When the sugya of Amir La'akum starts. If we're talking about a case that Epis has a shaykhis to Amir La'akum, we could start being done that maybe this case is also because of Mechubal Karka, and there could be a Maris Ayin of Amir La'akum. But when the whole sugya of Amir La'akum doesn't start, because it's bekablonis, and not only is it bekablonis, but you mamish instructed Tony beferish, do not work for me on Shabbos, then whatever Tony is doing, mamish has no shaykhis to you. When Reuven walks by and he sees Tony working on his construction site, he could feel 100% comfortable. This has zero to do with me. The whole sugya of Amir La'akum does not come into play here, and I don't even have to worry about Maris Ayin. I think that's pshat in the first sheet over here in the Mishnah Berurah of how to understand this Ramah. The Magen Avram comes very tactical. The Magen Avram says that's a very nice svara. It makes for a very nice raid in the Mismadrash. But the bottom line is there is Maris Ayin. If the Isser is Maris Ayin, so there is Maris Ayin, right? Because Yaakov Shmerel doesn't know this Torah. Yaakov Shmerel walks by, he sees Tony knocking in nails on Reuven's construction site. So if the problem is Maris Ayin, guess what? There is Maris Ayin. So how could you not chase him off the work site? I think that's what's going on over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah Vaiter. The cause of El Yerabah. The El Yerabah writes, even according to the Magen Avram and the El Yerabah, who say that Reuven does have to object to Tony if Tony's doing the work on Shabbos against his original Tanai, the Mikamokim Nira, She'ain Tzarech Lite Lehemois Kadei Sheyifsiku. Let's say Reuven goes over to Tony and says, Tony, what's the matter with you? I told you no work on Shabbos. And Tony says, look, Reuven, I know you told me I can't do work on Shabbos, but listen, you're a Jew. I understand you got a Shabbos problem. Me, I'm an Italian. I'm a Roman Catholic. It's not Shabbos for me. So I don't got a Shabbos problem. Now, for me, you're telling me not to work on Shabbos. You know what you're costing me? Because you're not letting me work on Shabbos, I'm going to lose a $500,000 job. A guy wants to give me a $500,000 job. I'm not going to be finished on time. So you don't want me to work on Shabbos, you're going to have to pay me more. So are you mechuyev? According to El Yerabah, according to the Magen Avram, he's doing work for you, b'kablanus, b'mechubal karka, on Shabbos, Maris Ayin. You're mechuyev to object. Are you mechuyev to pay him? Says the El Yerabah, no. That fight we're not going to go. We're not going to say that you have to pay him extra money to get him to stop. Since you did the right thing, you made a Tanai with Tony, and Tony agreed to the Tanai. So even the El Yerabah says, there's only so far we're going to go. We're not going to say that you have to spend money to chase him off the work site. Ad kan dvarav. Now, Chavetz Chaim is medayik in what the Eli Rabbah says. Mashma milashaynai says the implication of the Eli Rabbah's words are, Dim loy hisne mitchila. Let's say you didn't make a tanai with Tony when you hired him. Again, let's go back to the original, the simple kablanis case. You hired the kablan. So really there's no amir lakum. You're not supposed to let him work on Shabbos because it's b'chubal karka and there's a problem with marasayin. But you didn't make a tanai with him up front. You didn't tell him up front, don't work on Shabbos. Now you walk by and you see he is working on Shabbos. So now you got a marasayin problem, right? Says Mashma Mulshane, comes out from the El Yerabba. If you didn't make it tonight with Tony up front that he can't work on Shabbos, and now you see him working on Shabbos, it's not enough to just object to Tony. If you object to Tony and Tony says, I'm not leaving the work site unless you pay me an extra $10,000, now you got to spend money. The El Yerabba says, when do you not have to spend money to get him off the work site? If you made a Tanai up front. But if you didn't make a Tanai up front, you got to spend money. Venire, and the Chavetz Chaim says, Venire, it would appear, Shetaima, the rationale of the El Yerabba is, the Pasha, you were negligent. The Havalela Haslis Betchila, you should have made it tonight. And you didn't. V'tzarech Ian Ladina, he says, what the halacha l'mais is, he says, tzarech Ian. Now, there's two Dirshu footnotes that I would mention over here. One is Dirshu footnote number 19, which I'm not going to read inside to save time, because we still have a lot of Mishnah Berurah to do. But the Dirshu footnote 19 says, we're talking about a house that was built be'isser on Shabbos by a kablan in the case with his marasayin. He says, realize, we're not talking about where the whole house was built be'isser, right? It takes a long time to build a house. We're not talking about that the whole house is built be'isser on Shabbos. We're talking about some of the work on the house was done. So maybe the kitchen was installed on Shabbos. He says, that's also a problem. Because we're not going to say bittul b'roiv. We're not going to say, oh, roiv of the house was built beheter, only the kitchen was done be'isser. No, over here it's a knas. You had a kablan do work be'isser on Shabbos. We cancel you. We don't let you use the house, according to the Mechaber. It's true, even if a little bit was done on Shabbos. Then there's Dirshu footnote number 21, where we just said that according to the El Yerabba, if you didn't make a Tanai up front to tell Tony he can't work on Shabbos, even if you're going to have to spend money to get him off the construction site, you got to spend money. It brings down over here from the Kaf HaChaim, if you want to know what the schar that you get is, if you spend money to get rid of the workers on Shabbos, he brings down a story over here that there was a time that a wealthy person spent a lot of money to get to stop a goy from working on his house on Shabbos. A big fire broke out in the city, and when the fire came to his house, the Rebbeinu Shalom turned the wind around and blew the fire away from his house, and his house was saved. Okay, weiter. Now we go to Sif Dalet. Says the Mechaber Sif Dalet, 3 lines up from the bottom, Hey Amid Beis. Meleches Farhesia. Let's remember what we said at the beginning of Reish Mem Dalet. What we said in the very beginning of Reish Mem Dalet in Sif Aleph was, you're hiring a kablan. Inherently, there's no amir la'akum by a kablan. So a kablan should really is really mutter al piadin. But if the halacha is, in the words of if the matziv is, in the words of the Mechaber, if the malacha that's being done is, if it's known and it's public knowledge that the work that's being done is being done for Yid, then there's a problem of Maris Ayin even by Kablanis, and Kablanis becomes Aser. Now, from then until now, we've been using kind of a rule. We've been saying, what does it mean Yedua for Semes? Avoida that's B'chobel Karka. The rule of thumb is that anything that's B'chobel Karka, Shem Ba'olav Olav, everybody knows whose house that is. Everybody knows whose field that is. So work on a house is Avoida B'mechuber, that's considered Yedua for Semes. Work in a field, everybody knows whose field it is. They know the work is being done for a Yid. That's called Yedua for Semes, so it's also because of Marasayin. Now comes along the Mechaber here and says it's Sif Dalid, and he just explains to you, you should understand what we're talking about here. Says the Mechaber, Meleches Farhesia. when we say that there's a problem of Maris Ayin, when it's very well known and it's public knowledge, it's mufursim, that the malacha that's being done by the Kablan Eina Yehudi is being done for a Yid, says the Mechaber, afilu b'metaltalin, even if it's not melchuber l'karka, even if it's a movable item, kigoin sfina. Let's say an Eina Yehudi, a Kablan, is doing work on a boat that belongs to a Yid. Hayadu li Yisrael. Everybody knows that this boat is a Yiddish boat. I don't know the name. They like to name boats, so maybe the name on the boat is Masada. I don't know. Havanagila. Everybody knows that this boat is a Yiddish boat. So Dina Kamay Meleches Mechuber. That's considered Yedua Umafur Semes, that the work is being done for a Yid, and then there's a problem with Marasayan. So what the Mechaber is saying is, even though the examples that I gave you until now were all Mechuber Karka, that's not the deciding factor. It's not pshat that a Kabbalan Eina Yehudi is not allowed to do work for you b'mechuber l'karka, but he's allowed to do work for you b'metaltalin. No, the rule is he's not allowed to do work for you when it's yedua umafur semes that the work is being done for a Yid. And he is allowed to do work for you if the work that he's doing for you is bitzina. People don't know if it's a Yid. So if it's metaltalin and it's yedua umafur semes, that's also aser because of Marasayin. Matter of fact, the words of the Aruch HaShulchan, I love the Aruch HaShulchan. People who've been listening to my share for years know my feelings about the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan's words over here are some matim. The Aruch HaShulchan says, you know what the Mechaber is telling you? Ein ikar hahefresh bein tolush lemechuber. The rule over here is not mechuber aser mishum marasayin, tolush mutter mishum marasayin. No. Ella ikar hahefreshu bein tzina lefarhesia. The question is it public knowledge that the malach is being done for a Yid, or is it not? That's what the rule is. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Ois Katan Chav Gimel, Hayadu li Yisrael. If it's known that the work is being done for a Yid, then it's also Mishum Arasayin. The Mishnah Berurah comes to caution us. He says, what does it mean that it's Yadua li Yisrael? Ein ma'wi she'oisa oisa b'rishus Yisrael. It doesn't mean that the work is being done on a Yid's property. That's not what the Mechaber means over here when he says that any malacha is also because of Marasayin, even if it's talush, if it's known that it's being done for a Yid. What does that mean? Because it's being done on the Yid's property? Says Mishnah, no. Di hachi, any work that's being done on the Yid's property, afilu hayadina rakim metaltal in the alma, even if the Eina Yehudi Kablan is doing work on a piece of metaltalin that's not well known that it belongs to a Yid. Right? The boat that says on it, Am Yisrael Chai, that boat, when he does work on that boat, everybody knows that it's being done for a Yid. But what if he's doing work on a kitchen table? Right? Everybody doesn't know that it's a Yiddish kitchen table. But that would be usher if it would be done on the Yid's property. Any work is usher on a Yid's property. You can't have a Kabbalan Eina Yehudi fixing your kitchen table in your house or in your front yard. That's automatically you do a umafur semes, that it's being done for a Yid. He's doing it inside your rishus. So says the Mishnah Berurah, don't make a mistake. Don't think that when the Mechaber says anything that's Yedua li Yisrael is usher, he means if it's being done on your property. No, everything is usher on your property. So gam keno yasser, kedemuch b'simin reish dot beis if beis, daf b'metaltal and usher amaisay sabrishus Yisrael. Everything is usher if he's doing it in his property. Elamayri shaloi b'beisay. What the Mechaber means is, even if the Kablan Eina Yehudi is working on your boat that says Am Yisrael Chai, and he's doing it in his front yard 6 miles away from your house, that's also usher. Because the name of the boat, everybody sees it's a Yiddish boat that Tony is working on Shabbos. Mishnah Berurah further qualifies this. Again, what's the Mechaber saying? The Mechaber wants to be very clear to you. The Mechaber is telling you, we've seen that Kablanus is inherently mutter. We've seen that Kablanus is an Isser of Marasayin if it's very clear that the work is being done for a Yid. The Mechaber told us, what does that mean? For example, Malacha b'mechuber. Malacha b'mechuber l'karka is right away you do an umafur semes that it belongs to a Yid. Because kol mechuber l'karka shem ba'olav olav. Now, says the Mechaber, realize that there's also a problem of Marasayin, not b'mechuber. If it's a piece of metaltalin that everybody knows belongs to a Yid, let's say you have a goyish, a kablan carpenter who's working on an Aron Kodesh. B'kablonis on Shabbos, in his front yard. Everybody knows that that's being done for a Yid. So that would be also Mishamar Zayin. Now says the Mishnah Berurah, but that's only true if the Kablan Ein Yehudi is working on the Aron Kodesh in a place where people could see him. But if he's working on a Pitzina, if he has a workshop 300 miles away, which is not a Yidden site, and he's doing it inside the workshop, so then I don't care that it's an Aron Kodesh. Nobody knows that he's doing the work on Shabbos. That would be mutter. Okay. Let's go weiter in the Shulchan Aruch. 2 lines from the bottom. Hey, Beis, Siman Reish Mem Dalid, Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber, Im Sakar Ein Yehudi Lishana Oy Lishtayim. Let's say, and we're going to see what this case is in the Mishnah Berurah. Let's say you hire an Ein Yehudi Kablan to work for you for a year or two. What does that mean? Sheyichtov loy, that he should be your scribe. He should always be available to write for you. Obviously, ksiva is a daraisa. Oy sheyerag loy beged, or he should weave clothing for you. Harei ze kaisev va'arig b'Shabbos. He's allowed to do his writing and his weaving on Shabbos. Ki'ilu katzatzimai, it would be the same type of kablonis as if you set a set price to pay him for the job. Sheyichtov loy sefer, right? That would be regular kablonis. If you would go to a goyish scribe and say, I want you to write a book for me for $5,000. Or you take out your pen and write this book over for me for $5,000. And I don't care when you do it. You don't have to work on Shabbos. That's Kablonis 101. And that's Tolush. It's not Mechuber. He's going to do it B'tzina in his house. Nobody knows that it's a Yiddish book. It's done B'tzina. So that would be Mutter. Says the Mechaber, same thing. You could hire a scribe without the job being so defined. You could hire him to write for you for a year or to weave fabric for you for a year. And we're going to see exactly what the case is. But the Mechaber says that's Mutter. So long as you're not hiring him by the day. If you're hiring him, I want you to work for me every day for the next 365 days, then you're hiring for Shabbos. And the other caveat, says the Mechaber, is V'layasa hamalacha b'beis Yisrael. And furthermore, he's not allowed to do the malacha in your house. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah to understand exactly what this is talking about. Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chav Dalet. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Kasav Magen Avram. The Magen Avram writes, this is all based on a Rambam. So the Magen Avram says, Kavanas HaRambam. When the Kavan of the Rambam, when he gives this heter of hiring a scribe or a weaver for a year, Kederach HaSarim. This is like the nobleman, Sheyesh Lehem Sofer Miyuchad, who hire a sofer on a retainer. Or they hire a tailor on a retainer. Whenever the nobleman needs something written, he calls up his scribe and and now you have to write for me. But when the nobleman doesn't need him, he doesn't do any work. Therefore, that's why in this case the Ein Yehudi is allowed to write or weave on Shabbos. Because he has the option, he could work whenever he wants. The Yid's not going to instruct him to work on Shabbos. If he wants to work, he can work on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. And the Yid's not getting anything out of him doing the work on Shabbos. So what's the case over here according to the Magen Avram? The case according to the Magen Avram is a Yid made a deal with a Goyish scribe or a Goyish tailor. He said, I want you on retainer for 2 years. Whenever I have tailoring work, I want to know I can pick up the phone, I could call Tony the tailor, and Tony is available to me, and he's going to do sewing work for me. Now, is the Yid going to call Tony and say, I want you to work on Shabbos? No. What is he going to do? He's going to call Tony, his tailor on retainer, and say, I need a suit for Pesach. Make me a suit for Pesach. You can work whenever you want to work. It works better for you to work on Shabbos. You'll work on Shabbos. Now, I set a price. I hired you for 2 years. For $25,000, you're my tailor on retainer. For 2 years. Whenever I need a suit, I call you up. I tell you I need a suit. You make the suit whenever you want. Says the Mechaber. That's Kablonis. That's Mutter. I'm not telling you to work on Shabbos. I don't need you to work on Shabbos. You'll work on Shabbos when it's better for you. That's the way the Magen Avram understands the Rambam. Aval. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, Im schare lerag loy tamid b'shana zu, oy lichtov loy tamid. But let's say the deal is different. Let's say the deal is that Ruvain the Yid tells Tony the tailor, I want to buy your output for the next year or two. I'll pay you $25,000. All your weaving is mine. Whatever you produce over the next 2 years is mine. Aser afla Rambam lichtov loy b'Shabbos. The Magen Avram says that the Rambam would say that that's aser. Av shein medaktikal of al bittul ezayoim. Even if Ruvain says, I don't care if he takes off one Shabbos, but it doesn't matter. Because now you're buying his output for the year. If he doesn't work ever on any Shabbos, you're going to lose money. So now you want him to work on Shabbos because you're getting additional output when he works on Shabbos. That's the way the Magen Avram understands the Rambam. Taz mashma, from the Taz it's mashma. From the Taz it's mashma that the Rambam would be matter even this second case. Why? Because the bottom line is Ruvain says it's true. I bought Tony's output for the year. But I also said I don't mind if you take off a day every now and then. So you'll take off the Shabbos, you'll take off the Shabbos. So I'm not making him work on Shabbos. The imhu makbidal of shaloyeshev eze yom bottle. Because if the case would be that Ruvain mamish bought Tony's output for the year and he told him straight, I want you to work 365 days. So also l'kuli alma. That would be also according to everybody. Because then he mamish would be telling him, I want you to work on Shabbos. Because of a Taz, the Taz also writes, let's say you hired Tony Taka for a year or two, and you told him, I need you to finish X body of work during that time. Who kamakbid? If work on Shabbos is necessary to finish the designated body of work, that would be also. Because that's as if you're telling him, I'm makbid that you should work on Shabbos. But that's only true. That's only also if you know that the work cannot be completed without working on Shabbos. Even if you'll say, well, if he would stay up all night and work all night, he could finish it without Shabbos. No. That's called you telling him to work on Shabbos. So, okay. So the Mechaber said, you could hire an Eina Yehudi on a retainer. But what's Pshat, according to the Magen Avram? Pshat is, you could hire him on a retainer. I'm going to give you work throughout the year. Whenever I have work for you, you're going to work. Whenever I have work for you, you're going to work at your own schedule. So I'm not requiring you to work on Shabbos. And it's understood that when I have work for you, you're going to work. When I don't have work for you, you're not going to work. According to the Magen Avram, the Rambam, the Mechaber, says that that's mutter. But what would be aser? According to the Magen Avram, it would be aser to hire him and buy all his output for the year. Because then you really want him to work on Shabbos. You want his output on Shabbos. Even if you're not really so makbid and you don't mind if he takes off a day every now and then, doesn't matter. That would be aser, according to the Magen Avram. According to the Taz says that no, that also would be mutter. Why? Because you're still saying I don't mind if he takes off a day or two. It's important to have that distinction for what we're about to see. So the Mechaber said, this is mutter because this is kablanus. The same way it would be kablanus if you were to hire an Eida Yehudi kablan to say, I'll pay you $5,000, write me a book. The Mishnah Berurah is just coming to take out the word beged. He doesn't like that word beged. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber gave a caveat. This kind of kablanus arrangement, the retainer is mutter, but as long as you're not being makbid that he has to work every day and you're paying him for every day. Because that would be a schir yom. That would mean you're paying him for Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is only mutter if you're not makbid, if he takes off days. But if you're counting days, if he has to give you a cheshbon at the end of the year, and if he tells you he didn't work 365 days, he worked 363, and you're going to penalize him, so that means that you're paying him to work on Shabbos. And also the Mechaber said, certainly the work cannot be done in the Yid's house. for the guy to work in your house is always usher. Even under a kabbalah arrangement, that's mutter. The last one over here, the Mechaber said that there is yesh misha oiser b'seicher ein Yehudi l'zman. There are those that say that this type of arrangement is usher. Says the Mishnah Berurah, hu das haravid. This is the opinion of the Ravid who argues on the Rambam. V'hine l'das hataz anal. According to the Taz, we understand the Ravid. The Taz was very makel. The Taz took the Rambam's kula and extended it even to the case where you're going ahead and you're buying the Ein Yehudi's output for the year. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if that's pshat in the Rambam, I understand why the Ravid is being chaylik on the Rambam. Because then the Ravid is arguing on the Rambam, and he's saying, you're even going to be matter that scenario? Under that scenario, the Yid bought the Nachri's output for the year. He wants the Nachri to work on Shabbos. If he doesn't work on Shabbos, he loses that output. According to the Magen Avram, who doesn't extend the Rambam's heter that far. The Magen Avram only extended the Rambam's heter to the retainer situation, where I'm getting you on a retainer for 2 years. I'm never going to give you work on Shabbos. It's understood that when I don't have work for you, you're not going to do work. And now, if you wanted to work on Shabbos, then I've sheikavit. If that's pshat in the Rambam, why is the Ravid chaylik? What is there to be chaylik on? Why would that be usher? So says the Mishnah Berurah, Ladas Magen Avram Anal, Gam Kenicha. We could still understand why the Ravid is chaylik on the Rambam. Tisfir leila Ravid, because the Ravid holds Ta Yisrael Marviach b'masha Isa b'Shabbos. The bottom line is, says the Ravid, that the Yid is going to gain from the Ein Yehudi working on Shabbos. Why? What happens if the Yid, Ruvain, that has Tony the scribe on retainer, is very nice. He's never going to give him work to do on Shabbos. He's going to let him do his work at the same pace. But let's say Ruvain gave him work Thursday afternoon. Then, Motzi Shabbos, he realizes that he has an emergency lengthy letter or contract that has to be written. So he calls up Tony Sunday morning. He says, wow, I have an emergency. Drop everything. I need you to write a contract right now. And Tony says, I would love to, but the work that you gave me Thursday night, I didn't do yet. So now he's going to say, I'm sorry, just pick. Which one do you want me to get done? Do you want me to get the emergency contract that you gave me now done? Or do you want me to do the emergency contract you gave me Thursday done? So now it comes out that if Tony would have written Thursday night's work on Shabbos, Reuven would be in good shape, because now Tony the scribe is available on Sunday. But now, because Tony the scribe didn't work on Shabbos, he's not available on Sunday. So therefore the Ravid says, yes, it's very nice, Rambam. This retainer plan sounds mamish like kablonis, but really the Yid is being marviach because he has him on retainer, which means that he's counting on him all the time. If it would be a regular kablonis, if it would be pshat kablonis, I need you to write me these 500 pages, and I'm going to pay you $1,000, and there's no deadline, and do it whatever you want. So fine. So there's no Amir La'akum. I don't care if he works on Shabbos. If he wants to work on Shabbos, he's doing it for himself, not for me. But since you have him on a retainer, that means you might want to have him available on Sunday. Now, if he didn't cover his work on Shabbos, he's not available on Sunday. So now you do lose out by him not working on Shabbos. Therefore, the Ravid is chaylik on this Rambam, which is the basis for the Mechaber here in Sif Hey. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah, discussing Liman HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasim should do to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the B'yeskel Tzedek. B'meher v'yameinu amen. Be well.